The fall of Constantinople in 1453 marked not just the end of a city but the conclusion of an empire that had endured for over a millennium. The Byzantine Empire, the direct continuation of the Roman Empire in the East, had been a bastion of Christianity, art, culture, and political intrigue since the fall of Rome. Yet, by the mid-15th century, the empire had been reduced to little more than the city of Constantinople and its immediate surrounding territories. Surrounded by powerful adversaries and weakened by centuries of internal decline, the Byzantines faced an existential threat: the expanding Ottoman Empire under the ambitious and resolute Sultan Mehmed II. Sultan Mehmed II, often referred to as Mehmed the Conqueror, ascended the Ottoman throne in 1451 at the age of 19. Unlike many rulers of his era, Mehmed had a vision that extended far beyond the consolidation of his immediate domain. He understood the symbolic and strategic importance of Constantinople. Situated on the Bosporus Strait, the city controlled the vital maritime routes connecting the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, offering immense economic and military advantage. More importantly, Constantinople was a jewel of history, culture, and religion. Capturing it would not only cement Mehmed's power, but also demonstrate the supremacy of the Ottoman state and the inevitability of its expansion. The city itself, while renowned for its formidable walls and defensive architecture, had long been in decline. Once a vibrant hub of trade, philosophy, and art, Constantinople had suffered decades of political instability, territorial losses, and financial strain. Its population had dwindled, and the empire's army was a shadow of its former glory. Despite this, the Byzantine defenders, led by Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos, prepared to defend their city with unwavering determination. The emperor was acutely aware of the stakes. The loss of Constantinople would signify the final collapse of Byzantine civilization and the end of Christian dominion in the eastern Mediterranean. The siege itself began in early April 1453. Mehmed II approached the city with a meticulously organized army, estimated to number between 80,000 and 100,000 soldiers, far outmatching the meager 7,000 to 10,000 defenders of Constantinople. The Ottoman army was not merely large, it was technologically sophisticated for its time. Mehmed had commissioned the Hungarian engineer Orban to construct massive cannons capable of breaching the city's ancient walls, some of which had withstood sieges for over 1,000 years. These bombardments were relentless, echoing across the walls of Constantinople, shaking the very foundations of the city and the morale of its defenders. Despite the overwhelming odds, the Byzantines fought valiantly. The defenders leveraged every advantage they had, from the towering Theodosian walls to the strategic use of chains across the Golden Horn, designed to prevent Ottoman ships from attacking from the water. Emperor Constantine XI led his troops personally, inspiring courage and tenacity among soldiers and citizens alike. Stories from the siege describe the streets of Constantinople filled with citizens, men, women, and even children pitching in to repair walls, supply soldiers, and resist the invading forces. The siege was not just a military engagement, it was a desperate struggle for survival, the defense of an identity, a civilization, and a faith. Mehmed II, however, was relentless and methodical. He combined psychological warfare, military strategy, and sheer force to wear down the defenders. He offered amnesty to those who surrendered, attempted to exploit divisions within the city, and continuously tested the city's fortifications with his artillery. His tactics reflected not only military genius, but also a deep understanding of human psychology. He knew that the fall of Constantinople was not only a physical conquest, but also a symbolic one, demoralizing the defenders and asserting the inevitability of Ottoman dominion. The turning point came on May 29, 1453. After weeks of continuous bombardment and repeated assaults, the defenders were exhausted, their numbers severely depleted, and the city walls finally breached. Mehmed II's forces poured into the city, engaging in fierce street-to-street combat. Emperor Constantine XI is said to have fought bravely to the end, disappearing amidst the chaos and earning a near-mythical status as the last Roman emperor. By the end of the day, Constantinople had fallen, signaling the end of the Byzantine Empire. The conquest was not merely a military victory, it was a seismic event that reshaped the political, cultural, and religious landscape of the region. In the immediate aftermath, Sultan Mehmed II demonstrated both pragmatism and ruthlessness. He allowed his soldiers to plunder the city, as was customary in the aftermath of a conquest, but he also sought to stabilize his new domain. Mehmed issued proclamations promising protection to the inhabitants who remained, resettled populations to revitalize the city, and preserved many of its religious and cultural institutions. The Hagia Sophia, the grand cathedral of Constantinople, was converted into a mosque, symbolizing the city's transformation from a Christian bastion to a center of Islamic power. Yet despite these measures, the trauma of the conquest was immense, particularly for the surviving members of the Byzantine royal family, including Princess Theodora. The fall of Constantinople was more than a historical event, it was a story of human courage, ambition, and tragedy. It highlighted the vulnerabilities of even the most seemingly impregnable cities and empires, and it showcased the strategic brilliance and vision of Sultan Mehmed II. For Princess Theodora and other members of the Byzantine nobility, the city's fall meant the abrupt end of their world as they knew it, a world of privilege, security, and historical legacy. The once mighty palaces and streets of Constantinople became sites of uncertainty, captivity, and forced adaptation under Ottoman rule. The events surrounding the siege set the stage for the next chapter of Theodora's life, one shaped by the ambitions of Mehmed II and the dramatic upheaval of an entire empire. Ultimately, the fall of Constantinople serves as a pivotal moment in world history, symbolizing the transition from the medieval world to the early modern era. It reflects the clash of empires, the shift of power from east to west, and the enduring consequences of political, military, and cultural ambition. For Sultan Mehmed II, it was a crowning achievement that would define his legacy as the conqueror. For Princess Theodora, it was the beginning of a personal and profound upheaval, a story intertwined with the broader fate of an empire that had once stood as a beacon of civilization for over 1,000 years. Princess Theodora Komnene, a scion of the Byzantine imperial family, was born into a world of grandeur, privilege, and deep-seated traditions. Her life, like that of most Byzantine royalty, was shaped by the weight of history and the responsibilities of lineage. The Komnenos and Palaiologos dynasties had ruled the Byzantine Empire for centuries, their reigns marked by both brilliant cultural achievements and devastating political upheavals. As a princess, Theodora was groomed to embody the refinement, piety, and political acumen expected of someone of her stature. Her childhood was filled with lessons in diplomacy, language, literature, and the arts, preparing her to navigate the complex world of Byzantine court life, where alliances and rivalries were as much a part of daily existence as religious ceremonies and public appearances. Yet, by the time Theodora reached adolescence, the empire that had nurtured generations of her ancestors was in terminal decline. Constantinople, once a thriving metropolis and the jewel of the Mediterranean, was surrounded by Ottoman forces, and internal political instability had left the city vulnerable. As the threat of invasion loomed, Theodora's life, like that of her family, was increasingly dominated by fear and uncertainty. The luxuries of her youth, palatial surroundings, educated tutors, and ceremonial grandeur were overshadowed by the constant threat of war, siege, and the collapse of all she had known. Unlike other young women of her time, who might have faced arranged marriages or political alliances, Theodora faced a more immediate and terrifying uncertainty, the possibility of death, captivity, or the loss of her city and family. The Byzantine court, at this late stage in the empire's existence, had become a place of both political strategy and desperate hope. Emperor Constantine XI, Theodora's uncle or close relative depending on historical interpretations, sought to defend the city with limited resources, rallying troops and appealing to Western powers for assistance. Theodora, like other members of the imperial family, would have been acutely aware of these efforts, witnessing her family's dedication and anxiety. For a young princess, the looming siege of Constantinople was not merely a political crisis, but a personal one. The walls that had long promised security now seemed fragile under the relentless threat posed by Mehmed II and his formidable Ottoman army. As the siege commenced, Theodora's life changed dramatically. The city's defenders and residents faced daily bombardments, shortages of food and supplies, and the psychological toll of living under constant threat. Even within the relative safety of the imperial palaces, the realities of war were unavoidable. Rumors of breaches, the screams of wounded soldiers, and the tension among palace staff would have shaped her days and nights. Theodora's childhood, once filled with ceremonial dances, religious festivals and scholarly pursuits, was abruptly replaced by the grim necessities of survival. She and her family had to confront a harsh new reality, that the empire's walls might not hold and that their privileged status would offer limited protection in the chaos to come. The fall of Constantinople on May 29, 1453, was catastrophic for the imperial family. Emperor Constantine XI reportedly died defending the city, leaving the remaining royal members vulnerable to the conquerors. Theodora's once secure position as a princess became a precarious existence. The Ottoman forces, following customary practices of conquest, sought to secure control over the city by neutralizing potential threats from the former ruling elite. Royal women, particularly young and unmarried princesses, were often viewed as valuable assets in the political and social strategies of the victorious rulers. For Theodora, this meant that her personal safety and freedom were now inextricably tied to the ambitions of Mehmed II, the very man who had orchestrated the fall of her ancestral city. Historical accounts suggest that Theodora, like many other Byzantine princesses, faced the terrifying prospect of captivity. Unlike soldiers or officials, royal women could not easily flee, and their capture was both a symbol of conquest and a strategic advantage. Theodora's status made her a prize in the Ottoman scheme. She could be used to legitimize Mehmed's rule over the newly conquered territories, to forge alliances, or to demonstrate his dominance over the former ruling dynasty. For a young woman who had spent her life in the corridors of power, this sudden reversal from a position of influence to one of vulnerability was nothing short of a psychological and emotional upheaval. Theodora's royal identity, carefully cultivated through education, ceremony, and lineage, now became both a burden and a source of danger under Ottoman dominion. In addition to the immediate threat to her freedom, Theodora had to confront the loss of her family and the collapse of her social world. Many members of the Byzantine elite were killed, enslaved, or scattered across the region, leaving Theodora isolated and uncertain about her fate. The grand palaces, churches, and public spaces of Constantinople, once central to her life, were now controlled by foreign powers. The cultural, religious, and political institutions that had defined her upbringing were being systematically transformed to serve the Ottoman state. For Theodora, every familiar space, every cherished ritual, and every symbol of her lineage was either gone or repurposed, further intensifying her sense of dislocation and vulnerability. Despite these overwhelming challenges, historical records suggest that Theodora and other royal women demonstrated resilience in the face of adversity. Captivity, while traumatic, did not always strip them of agency. Women of her rank often navigated the complexities of life under Ottoman rule with intelligence and adaptability, using their education, social skills, and personal networks to secure some measure of security or influence. However, The psychological toll of losing one's homeland, witnessing the destruction of a civilization, and being subjected to the whims of a conqueror was immense. Theodora's adolescence and early adulthood, years that might have been filled with growth, exploration, and personal achievement, were instead dominated by trauma, uncertainty, and a profound sense of loss. Theodora's shattered life also reflected the broader tragedy of the Byzantine Empire. Her personal story mirrored the collapse of centuries of political, cultural, and religious achievement. The fall of Constantinople was not just a military event, it was a human catastrophe, particularly for those like Theodora, who had been born into the structures of power that were suddenly erased. Her experience illustrates how history's grand events, the strategies of emperors, the sieges of cities, the ambitions of conquerors, intersect with individual lives, often with devastating consequences. In conclusion, princes, Theodora's life, before the fall of Constantinople, was one of privilege, education, and carefully cultivated status within a centuries-old empire. However, the siege and eventual conquest by Sultan Mehmed II abruptly transformed her existence, thrusting her from security into uncertainty, from power into vulnerability. The luxuries, influence, and protections of her royal lineage were stripped away in the violence and upheaval of the city's fall. Her story serves as a poignant reminder of the human dimension of historical events, showing how political ambition and military conquest can shatter lives, dreams, and identities. Theodora's personal tragedy was inseparable from the larger tragedy of Constantinople itself, a city that had stood as a beacon of civilization for over 1,000 years, now fallen and irrevocably changed, leaving its royal daughters to navigate a world dominated by new rulers, foreign customs, and an uncertain fate. Sultan Mehmed II, who ascended the Ottoman throne in 1451 at the young age of 19, was not just a ruler of ambition. He was a calculated strategist and a visionary leader. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Mehmed understood that military power alone was insufficient to secure long-term dominance. The fall of Constantinople, the jewel of the Eastern Roman Empire, was not merely a symbolic victory, it was a pivotal step in his broader plan to establish the Ottoman Empire as the preeminent power bridging Europe and Asia. His approach to this conquest combined careful preparation, political acumen, psychological warfare, and a nuanced understanding of diplomacy. Every move he made was carefully calculated, reflecting his determination to leave an enduring legacy as Mehmed the Conqueror. From the outset, Mehmed's preparations for the siege of Constantinople were meticulous. He knew that the city, fortified over centuries with massive walls, had repelled numerous previous invaders. To overcome these defenses, he employed the latest military technology and engineering innovations. One of his most famous strategic moves was the commissioning of Orban, a Hungarian cannon maker, to design massive artillery capable of battering the city's formidable Theodosian walls. These cannons, some weighing over 16 tons, could hurl stone projectiles with devastating force, a technology unprecedented in siege warfare. By investing in such advanced weaponry, Mehmed demonstrated a deep understanding of the interplay between technology and strategy. He recognized that superior equipment could offset the numerical and psychological advantages of the defenders. However, Mehmed's strategy extended beyond brute force. He was acutely aware of the importance of psychological and political calculations in warfare. The mere presence of the Ottoman army, reportedly numbering between 80,000 and 100,000 soldiers, was intended to intimidate the smaller Byzantine defenders. Beyond numbers, Mehmed utilized propaganda and diplomacy to weaken morale within the city. He offered safe passage and favorable terms to those who surrendered, attempting to sow distrust and division among the Byzantines. Such overtures were not just acts of mercy, they were deliberate psychological tactics designed to make the defenders doubt their chances and consider surrender, minimizing prolonged conflict and casualties for his own forces. Another critical aspect of Mehmed's strategic thinking was his ability to leverage geography and logistics. He understood that controlling the Bosporus and the surrounding regions was essential for both military operations and long-term governance. In preparation for the siege, he orchestrated the construction of fortified positions around the city and established supply lines to ensure that his army could be sustained for an extended period. He famously dragged his fleet overland across the Galata Peninsula to bypass the chain defenses of the Golden Horn, a daring move that caught the defenders off guard and demonstrated both ingenuity and audacity. This strategic maneuver not only showcased his tactical brilliance, but also sent a clear message: Mehmed was willing to think outside conventional methods to achieve his objectives. Mehmed also understood the importance of timing and coordination. He patiently built his power base in the years leading up to the siege, consolidating control over surrounding territories and neutralizing potential internal threats. By the time he moved against Constantinople, he had ensured that the Ottoman state was politically stable enough to sustain a prolonged military campaign. This careful timing reflected his awareness that a premature assault could risk both failure and the destabilization of his empire. Mehmed's patience, combined with his aggressive military strategies, exemplified his dual approach. He was both a visionary planner and a relentless executor of complex operations. Crucially, Mehmed's political calculations extended beyond the battlefield. He was fully aware that conquering Constantinople would not only enhance his prestige but also carry immense symbolic significance. The city was a center of Christianity, the seat of the Byzantine emperors, and a repository of immense wealth and cultural heritage. Its capture would demonstrate the ascendancy of the Ottoman Empire and solidify Mehmed's image as a ruler capable of achieving what many had thought impossible. This symbolic victory had far-reaching implications. It would intimidate neighboring powers, attract loyal subjects, and legitimize Ottoman authority over newly conquered territories. Mehmed's understanding of symbolism and perception in statecraft was as sophisticated as his milita planning. Furthermore, Mehmed's strategic approach included an element of calculated mercy and integration. While he allowed his soldiers to loot and take spoils, he also sought to stabilize the city under Ottoman control. He issued proclamations protecting inhabitants who remained, restored order, and encouraged resettlement to revitalize the population. Religious institutions, particularly the Hagia Sophia, were repurposed to reflect Ottoman dominance, yet they were preserved in ways that maintained their cultural significance. These actions reflected Mehmed's recognition that long-term control required both authority and legitimacy. By combining conquest with governance, he sought to transform Constantinople from a conquered city into a thriving Ottoman capital that could withstand future challenges. Mehmed's political calculations also extended to the Byzantine royal family and nobility. He understood that the treatment of key figures such as Princess Theodora was not only a matter of personal interaction, but also a strategic tool. Capturing members of the royal family could prevent potential uprisings, legitimize Ottoman rule in the eyes of former Byzantine subjects, and allow the Sultan to negotiate alliances or marriages that further secured his position. In this sense, Mehmed's handling of Theodora and other nobles was part of a broader strategy to consolidate power and integrate the remnants of the Byzantine elite into the Ottoman system, turning potential threats into assets. The Sultan's strategy was multi-layered, reflecting a rare combination of military genius, psychological insight, and political foresight. He understood that victory on the battlefield alone was insufficient without careful management of the aftermath. The conquest of Constantinople required not just the storming of walls, but the establishment of sustainable governance, the project, son of authority, and the manipulation of perception. Mehmed's moves were meticulously calculated to ensure that the fall of the city would lead to lasting dominance rather than temporary triumph. His approach was comprehensive, addressing immediate military objectives while also planning for the complex socio-political realities of ruling a formerly hostile population. In conclusion, Sultan Mehmed II's strategic moves and political calculations were central to the successful conquest of Constantinople. His combination of military innovation, psychological tactics, logistical planning, and political foresight set him apart as one of history's most formidable rulers. Mehmed's actions demonstrated an acute understanding of both the art of war and the subtleties of governance. By preparing meticulously, exploiting the weaknesses of the Byzantine state, and anticipating the challenges of post-conquest administration, he ensured that the fall of Constantinople would not be merely a transient victory, but a transformative event in world history. His strategic brilliance not only secured the Ottoman Empire's dominance over the eastern Mediterranean, but also laid the groundwork for the city's transformation into a thriving Ottoman capital, a symbol of conquest, power, and enduring legacy. These calculated moves directly impacted Princess Theodora and the remaining Byzantine nobility, setting the stage for the personal and political challenges she would face in the aftermath of the conquest. Mehmed's actions toward them were guided not by mere cruelty, but by strategic reasoning. Every decision, from captivity to potential marriage alliances, reflected a deliberate effort to consolidate power, prevent rebellion, and integrate the Byzantine legacy into the Ottoman framework. Understanding Mehmed's strategy provides essential context for comprehending the fate of Theodora and the dramatic transformation of her life. Following the fall of her city, the fall of Constantinople in 1453 marked the end of the Byzantine Empire, but for its surviving royal members, particularly Princess Theodora Komnene, the consequences were intensely personal, immediate, and life-altering. As a young woman of royal blood, Theodora's life had been defined by privilege, education, and a degree of political influence. Yet, the conquest of her city by Sultan Mehmed II thrust her into a reality of uncertainty, fear, and vulnerability. In the aftermath, questions of her fate, whether captivity, marriage, or exile, loomed large, influenced by both her status as a princess and Mehmed's political objectives. Captivity was often the first and most immediate reality for royal women following the fall of a city in the medieval and early modern world. In the case of Constantinople, Mehmed II adhered, at least initially, to the common practice of taking members of the former ruling elite into his custody. Theodora, along with other noblewomen and surviving members of the imperial family, was confined under close supervision. The aim of such captivity was multifaceted. It neutralized potential threats, prevented uprisings that might rally around the surviving royals, and provided the conqueror with valuable assets that could be leveraged in political negotiations. For Theodora, captivity was not merely a loss of freedom, it was a symbolic subjugation of her lineage and an assertion of Ottoman supremacy over Byzantine heritage. Yet, captivity alone was not the full measure of Mehmed's strategic thinking. Historical records and analyses suggest that the Sultan also considered marriage as a tool to consolidate power and secure loyalty. In the medieval world, especially in Byzantine and Ottoman political culture, marriages were often instruments of diplomacy and control. A princess like Theodora could potentially be married to an Ottoman prince or noble, thereby intertwining the Byzantine royal bloodline with the emerging Ottoman elite. Such alliances would serve multiple purposes, legitimizing Ottoman rule over former Byzantine territories, reducing the likelihood of rebellion from loyalist factions, and integrating the remnants of the Byzantine aristocracy into the Ottoman administrative and social structure. In this light, Theodora's potential marriage was less a personal matter and more a calculated political strategy orchestrated by Mehmed. Historical accounts differ on the specifics of Theodora's fate. Some suggest that she may have been offered marriage to a high-ranking Ottoman official or kept within the Sultan's court as a political pawn. Regardless of the exact details, it is clear that her life was now under the direct control of Mehmed II, and every decision regarding her future would serve the broader strategic aims of the Ottoman state. This reality underscores the stark contrast between her life as a Byzantine princess, where her choices were shaped by education, ceremony, and courtly influence, and her life under Ottoman rule, where her agency was significantly constrained by the political imperatives of a conqueror. Exile was another potential outcome, though in Theodora's case, it was less likely in the immediate aftermath of the conquest. For many nobles who survived the fall of their cities, flight to foreign courts or distant territories was a possible recourse. However, the geographical and political landscape surrounding Constantinople offered few safe havens. The Ottoman Empire had rapidly expanded and secured territories around the city, limiting opportunities for escape. Moreover, Mehmed's intelligence network was highly effective at tracking former Byzantine elites, reducing the feasibility of exile. As a result, Theodora's options were largely constrained to captivity within the city or integration into the Sultan's court through marriage or service, highlighting the narrow paths available to a woman of her status in the turbulent political environment of post-conquest Constantinople. The psychological impact of captivity, potential marriage, or coerced exile cannot be understated. For Theodora, these circumstances represented not only a physical loss of freedom, but also an emotional and cultural rupture. The world she had known, defined by Byzantine customs, Orthodox Christian faith, familial networks, and imperial prestige, was being systematically dismantled. Every day under Mehmed's authority reminded her of the vulnerability of her position and the impermanence of royal privilege. Captivity and potential marriage into a foreign ruling elite required adaptation to new cultural norms, religious practices, and political hierarchies, a daunting challenge for any young woman whose formative years had been steeped in a different tradition. Yet, it is also important to recognize the resilience and agency that Theodora and women like her could exercise even under constrained circumstances. Historical evidence suggests that noblewomen in the Ottoman court, while initially appearing to be passive participants in political strategies, often navigated complex social dynamics to secure some measure of influence or protection. They could act as mediators, advisors, or patrons within the court, leveraging their education, social skills, and connections. For Theodora, her intelligence, cultural refinement, and royal pedigree may have provided avenues for survival and even subtle power, though always within the limits defined by her captors and the Sultan's strategic needs. The broader context of Mehmed II's treatment of Byzantine royalty also shaped Theodora's experience. Mehmed's actions were guided by a pragmatic understanding of power. He recognized that the loyalty of surviving nobles could stabilize newly conquered territories, while mistreatment could provoke unrest and resistance. This calculus influenced decisions regarding marriage, custody, and integration into Ottoman society. Theodora's status as a princess made her a valuable political asset, and her fate would ultimately reflect Mehmed's strategic balance between showing dominance and ensuring political stability. Captivity or marriage was not merely punitive, it was a deliberate mechanism to incorporate the Byzantine legacy into the Ottoman framework while mitigating potential threats. Religion and culture further complicated Theodora's situation. As a devout Orthodox Christian, she now lived under the authority of a Muslim ruler whose policies were reshaping the spiritual and cultural landscape of Constantinople. Her potential marriage or service within the court would have required adaptation to a new religious context, adding layers of personal and spiritual tension. Theodora's experience highlights the intersection of political power and cultural identity, illustrating how conquest reshapes not only territory but also the personal and religious lives of those caught in its wake. Ultimately, the fate of Princess Theodora reflects the precarious position of women in the aftermath of imperial conquest. Captivity, marriage, or exile were not merely personal choices, but instruments of statecraft wielded by rulers like Mehmed II to consolidate power, neutralize threats, and legitimize authority. Theodora's life, after the fall of Constantinople, exemplifies the complex interplay between personal tragedy and political strategy. Her experiences underscore how royal women, while often appearing passive in historical narratives, were central figures in the negotiations of power, survival, and cultural continuity. In conclusion, Theodora's life after the fall of Constantinople was defined by uncertainty and the imposition of political strategies over personal freedom. Captivity kept her under close Ottoman supervision, preventing potential uprisings and securing her as a political asset. Marriage, whether to a high-ranking Ottoman noble or as part of a broader political arrangement, offered a path to survival and integration, albeit at the cost of autonomy and cultural continuity. Exile, while theoretically possible, was constrained by geography, politics, and Mehmed's strategic intelligence. Throughout this period, Theodora's experience illustrates the harsh realities of life for royal women in the wake of conquest, lives governed by the ambitions of men, geopolitical calculations, and the sudden collapse of centuries-old social hierarchies. Yet even within these constraints, Theodora's story also speaks to resilience, adaptability, and the subtle exercise of agency in navigating a dramatically altered world. While Mehmed II's conquest determined the broad strokes of her fate, her personal experience reflects the enduring human capacity to survive, adapt, and navigate the complexities of power, even in circumstances marked by profound loss and uncertainty. Theodora's life, therefore, is both a personal tragedy and a window into the broader consequences of one of history's most significant military and political events, the fall of Constantinople, and the intricate human stories that unfolded in its aftermath. The conquest of Constantinople in 1453 by Sultan Mehmed II was more than a decisive military victory. It was a transformative event with profound consequences for the Byzantine royal family and the remnants of the empire's elite. For centuries, the Byzantine emperors and their relatives had symbolized continuity, political authority, and cultural sophistication. Yet, Mehmed II's calculated strategies, ranging from the siege itself to the treatment of surviving royals like Princess Theodora, shattered this continuity and redefined the place of Byzantine nobility in the new Ottoman order. The legacy of his actions extended far beyond immediate military conquest, influencing the political, social, and cultural trajectory of the region for generations. One of the most immediate impacts of Mehmed's conquest was the systematic disruption of Byzantine aristocratic structures. Members of the imperial family, including princesses and princes, were thrust into circumstances they had never encountered, transitioning from sovereigns or sovereign-adjacent figures to political pawns in the Ottoman system. Princess Theodora, emblematic of this transformation, exemplified the dramatic shift from autonomy to subjugation. The once powerful Byzantine family now faced captivity, potential marriages arranged by their conqueror, or coerced integration into Ottoman society. These measures effectively neutralized the political influence of Byzantine nobility, while preserving their symbolic value as tools of legitimacy for Mehmed's rule. By controlling the surviving royal family, Mehmed ensured that no alternative centers of loyalty or rebellion could coalesce around the remnants of the Byzantine dynasty. The Sultan's decisions regarding marriage alliances further illustrate the calculated use of surviving royals to consolidate power. While direct records of Theodora's personal experiences are limited, the broader historical context demonstrates that Ottoman rulers often married or placed captured noblewomen into households of loyal officials. This practice served multiple purposes. It legitimized Ottoman authority over former Byzantine territories, facilitated the integration of elite knowledge and networks into Ottoman governance, and minimized The risk of revolt. In essence, the Byzantine royal bloodline was repurposed to serve the continuity and expansion of the Ottoman state. Princesses like Theodora were transformed from symbols of imperial independence into instruments of political strategy, a reality that redefined their personal legacies and reshaped the historical memory of Byzantine royalty. Beyond immediate political calculations, Mehmed's conquest had long-term cultural and symbolic implications. The Byzantine Empire had been a bastion of Orthodox Christianity, art, and architecture, with the royal family at the center of religious and civic life. By capturing the city and its royalty, Mehmed signaled not just the triumph of the Ottoman state, but also a broader cultural and ideological shift. Institutions such as the Hagia Sophia were converted into mosques, and the Byzantine elite were gradually absorbed into the Ottoman system. Theodora's life, and that of her peers, became a microcosm of this broader transformation, the intersection of political subjugation, cultural assimilation, and the redefinition of social hierarchies under a new imperial order. The personal fates of these royals thus mirrored the broader transition from a Christian Byzantine world to a Muslim Ottoman hegemony. The fall of Constantinople also had profound psychological and symbolic effects on the Byzantine diaspora. Surviving members of the imperial family and nobility fled to Western Europe or other regions, carrying with them stories of loss, captivity, and the end of an empire. These narratives influenced European perceptions of the Ottomans and heightened the sense of urgency for political and religious mobilization in the West. For example, Theodora's captivity and uncertain fate served as a potent reminder of the human cost of Ottoman expansion and became part of the broader European discourse on the fallen Byzantine world. Mehmed's actions, therefore, not only reshaped the immediate political landscape, but also reverberated across Europe, influencing diplomacy, military strategy, and the imagination of rulers and citizens alike. The strategic assimilation of Byzantine nobility into Ottoman governance also left a lasting legacy on statecraft and administrative structures. By incorporating former elites through marriage, service, or patronage, Mehmed II strengthened the Ottoman bureaucratic system while maintaining social stability. The Byzantine princes and princesses, once independent rulers or influencers, became conduits for Ottoman authority, carrying knowledge of administrative practices, courtly etiquette, and regional alliances into their new roles. In this sense, Mehmed's treatment of Theodora and other royals contributed not only to immediate political consolidation, but also to the long-term institutional sophistication of the Ottoman Empire. The legacies of the Byzantine royal family, though transformed and subordinated, continued to influence governance, diplomacy, and elite culture under Ottoman rule. Religious and cultural implications were equally significant. The Byzantine royal family had been intrinsically tied to Orthodox Christianity, with the emperor traditionally seen as God's representative on earth within the Eastern Church. Mehmed II's conquest and his treatment of the royal family disrupted this divine political relationship. By exerting control over surviving members like Theodora, the Sultan demonstrated the supremacy of the Ottoman state over religious authority and the old imperial order. This shift not only redefined political power but also challenged the theological and cultural frameworks that had sustained Byzantine society for over a millennium. For Theodora, navigating life under Ottoman rule meant negotiating her personal faith in a system that had subordinated her former religious hierarchy to a new imperial order. The consequences for individual family members, like Theodora, were also personal and generational. Captivity, arranged marriages, and integration into Ottoman households often meant the loss of personal autonomy, the necessity to adopt new cultural norms, and the erasure or transformation of previous identities. In this way, Mehmed II's actions created a rupture between the pre-conquest Byzantine world and the post-conquest Ottoman reality. The personal legacies of these royals were no longer measured by sovereignty or influence, but by their survival, adaptation, and occasional contribution to the Ottoman state. Theodora's experiences exemplify this profound transformation, highlighting how a once powerful dynasty was recontextualized within a new imperial framework. Moreover, Mehmed II's actions established a model for the treatment of defeated elites that would influence Ottoman policy for centuries. The combination of strategic captivity, political marriages, and controlled integration became a template for managing conquered peoples, balancing authority with pragmatism. The experience of Theodora and other Byzantine royals illustrated the effectiveness of this approach, as it neutralized potential threats while harnessing the value of their cultural and political knowledge. In this sense, the legacy of Mehmed's treatment of Byzantine royalty extended beyond a single conquest, shaping the broader administrative, political, and social strategies of the Ottoman Empire. Finally, the historical memory of Mehmed II's conquest and its impact on Byzantine royalty has endured in both Eastern and Western narratives. In Ottoman historiography, he is celebrated as a brilliant and just ruler who transformed a fragmented empire into a centralized dominant state. In Byzantine and European accounts, however, the conquest represents tragedy, loss, and the subjugation of an ancient lineage. Princess Theodora, as a surviving member of the imperial family, embodies this dual legacy, a symbol of the grandeur and sophistication of the Byzantine world, yet also a reminder of its vulnerability and ultimate defeat. Her life after the fall of Constantinople serves as a lens through which historians and readers can understand the complex interplay of power, survival, and adaptation in the aftermath of empire. In conclusion, Sultan Mehmed II's actions toward the Byzantine royal family, particularly Princess Theodora, left a profound and enduring legacy. By combining military conquest with strategic assimilation, he reshaped the political, cultural, and social landscape of Constantinople and its former territories. The immediate effects, captivity, potential marriages, and the integration of elites into the Ottoman system ensured both the consolidation of power and the prevention of rebellion. The broader consequences included the transformation of Byzantine cultural and religious authority, the adaptation of royal lineages into Ottoman governance, and the enduring symbolic impact of the empire's fall on both Eastern and Western consciousness. Princess Theodora's life, marked by the abrupt transition from imperial privilege to constrained survival under Ottoman rule, exemplifies the human dimension of these historical shifts. Mehmed II's strategic brilliance ensured not only the military conquest of a city, but also the lasting incorporation of its ruling elite into a new order, reshaping the trajectory of history for generations to come. The legacy of his actions toward Byzantine royalty reflects a rare combination of tactical genius, political foresight, and an acute understanding of human and institutional behavior, a legacy that continues to resonate in the study of empire, conquest, and survival.